echoes. Or maybe either shut the mic or the sound. Okay. All right, just going to wait another minute or so. And Khani will be walking in the door. She'll take the baby. And a couple more people will probably join. Here we go.
I'm trying to.
All right, just going to set this up. Okay. Ready to start in one moment. One moment. Right. We're ready to go. Let's just sort this out.
Oh, now it's not switching off.
If you just want to mute one of the chat or any one of your screens or shut one off, otherwise it's just going to go and repeat. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, I think we are ready to begin. Okay, so good evening, everyone. And welcome tonight to the Shir, which the topic of tonight's Shir is a step-by-step guide to the Seder. I want to welcome you all here. I want to first of all welcome those who have joined the Unity Shiurim, which was set up by Rabbi Krebs. And we'd like to thank him for that beautiful initiative of different shiurim throughout Sydney, different rabbis giving different shiurim. So we have that feed on as well as we have Facebook Live for all those who aren't necessarily as savvy or don't prefer not to use Zoom. And we have the other Zoom as well. So I want to welcome you all here today for this shiur. So I'll start off. The reason why I chose this topic was obviously we're in this situation today. Everyone's unfortunately at home, and typically every year I would I would run a communal Seder at the Shul Chabad. And this year, unfortunately, due to the situation, due to the circumstances, that is not possible. And I realized that not only will the people that usually attend the Chabad Seder not be there, but actually many people that usually would have gone to friends or attended other Sedarim will unfortunately have to be home, and therefore will have to make their own Seder. So I was thinking about giving over some insights and some thoughts and maybe some advice, and first of all, practically what to do with your Seder, but also to give an understanding of what exactly is going on. In fact, just on that note, is if any of you are working with Chabad across Australia to create a Seder to go kit for those people that haven't really done a Seder and need like a bit of a basic Seder plate with a guide, etc., etc. And if any of you need one, please reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to get one for you. So I was thinking about, or when I started thinking about what we're going to discuss tonight, initially my idea was we'll go through each thing step by step, and we'll kind of run through the whole Seder and give you a basic idea. The thing is that there's the Seder in general is one of probably the most, it's something that is so commented on. There's so much to learn and read and understand about the Seder that I don't know if we'll get it through everything today. So therefore, I think we'll continue it next week. But we'll start with a bit more of a general background, understanding some of the different aspects of the Seder, just practical aspects. And we'll go on from there, running through the Seder. So the first thing that I would like to share is give us really an understanding of what is the Seder all about, meaning what should our approach be to the Seder? The Seder is not just a bunch of practical, physical traditions that we do. You dip the maror in the charoises, and you dip the karpas in the salt water, and you have your matzah and everything, and you're running through the traditions, and you argue with your old uncle, and the haida afikomen. There's a lot of nice traditions, but how can we personally relate to the Seder, and how can a Seder be a little bit more meaningful for us? So in order to understand that, I just wanted to digress slightly a little bit and to understand what are we celebrating, meaning how can we relate to this that we are celebrating. And I want to start with an interesting parable by the Dubna Maggid. The Dubna Maggid was a famous rabbi known for his parables, and he brings a very interesting story, which with that we can relate a little bit to understand what we are celebrating. And he tells the story of a king who's going with his entourage, and he's traveling on a journey, and he has a number of his soldiers, and they're traveling, and it's quite hot. It's they're in the outback. It's 40 degrees, and it's the middle of the summer, and it's the drought, of course. It's very hot, and one of the soldiers faints. And so immediately, obviously he's dehydrated. The king sends another one of his soldiers and says, "Go, travel. We know there's a river about 15 kilometers from here. Take your horse, go there, get the water, bring back water for this soldier in order to kind of help him out of a situation." So the guy, indeed, he travels and he goes there. And in the meantime, the soldier's situation is digressing and it's getting worse and worse. So the king turns to one of his other men and he says, "Guys, look, sometimes you can find wells in the middle of nowhere. How about you dig here, right where we are now, dig in this spot, and maybe deep down you'll find a well of water, and you'll be able to revive this guy." So they start digging and they're digging and they're digging, and lo and behold, they come across water, kind of as a last resort. They didn't want to wait. It was getting bad. Anyway, they get the water and they give it to this guy and they revive him. And 5 minutes later, this other soldier shows up and he comes with a big bucket of water. But by then, obviously, they don't need it anymore. Now, the next day, there's another man traveling in the same spot. And it's the middle of this heat wave, as we said. And he's traveling and he's also thirsty. And he comes across this well of water. Now, if we told the man, if the story that happened the day before, we told the man a story, we said, "Matt, sir, there's a story of a king and he sent out a minister and he went to get water from a well and the water came back and he gave him to drink." It's a nice story to the second man the next day. But if we are telling this man the story that actually happened, that they then dug and they found a well, that's actually relevant to him. Why? Because now that they found this well, he now has water with which he can drink and revive himself. Which means some stories is history. It's something of the past. There are other stories that have an actual relevance to us. And that's the Dubde Magid's example to explain how Pesach is Manche Ruseinu, the time of our freedom. We say in the bracha, we say, for example, on Chanukah, we say, in those days and these times. These stories of Jewish tradition, Chanukah, Pesach, they are not just a story of what happened. The guy went and brought the soldier water and everything's nice and fine, but it's about how it's relevant to us today. They dug that well, they found water, and because of that, there's now a well there till today that you can go revive yourself with. So that's how we have to look at the Seder. Now, how can we look at it like that? How do we look at the Seder like that? And what should our perspective be as we go into the Seder? We say in the middle of the Seder, we say, B'chol dor vador, and every generation person has to see himself as if he has come out of Egypt. And there are those that explain that B'chol dor vador means B'chol yom vayom, every single day. How do we do that? So how do we envisage ourselves as if we have personally left Egypt? There's a number of aspects. Number one, there's the most simplest level, and that is that had our ancestors not be taken out of Egypt, we'd be in Egypt, practically speaking. We'd still be there. We would never have been redeemed. Fine. Very simple level. The second level is that the second way of looking at it, and this is a beautiful explanation, is I'll begin it with a question. If Pesach is celebrating our freedom, how come you have a situation that there are Jews that are very far from free and nevertheless celebrate Pesach? What's an example? The Holocaust. We have all these stories in the Holocaust that Jews hiding in bunkers are celebrating Pesach. Spanish Inquisition, how many stories are there of the Spanish Inquisition, these Marranos that officially they act out as Spaniards, as Christians, as non-Jews, but they hide in some bunker, in some hidden passage, in some back corridor to celebrate Pesach. And what are they celebrating? The time of our freedom. And the biggest question you can ask is, how are they celebrating freedom if they don't seem very free themselves? I mean, to a certain degree, we could ask that ourselves. Here, we're going to be celebrating at home, and we might not feel that free. How are we celebrating freedom if we're not really free? Now, obviously, to us, it's a much lower level, but throughout the generations, the Jews have celebrated Pesach every single year, and there have been many times that the Jews could not leave their home for danger of being murdered. There have been pogroms. There have been, like I said, the Holocaust, Spanish Inquisition. How we celebrate freedom? And the answer is very simple. What is the freedom we are celebrating? What is the freedom all about? What is the freedom of Pesach? The freedom of Pesach it's not just a physical freedom, it's a mindset. It's a mental freedom. When we left Egypt, when we were in Egypt, we were slaves and we didn't know anything but slavery. There were people that grew up like that. That was their life. That's how they grew up. That was life. When we left Egypt, what happened to us? We got a mindset of free people. We became mentally free. And therefore, throughout the generations, we've been able to celebrate Pesach, although we are enslaved. We're able to celebrate Pesach as mentally free people. And you know what? That is the biggest proof. The fact that we celebrated Pesach in the Holocaust, in the Spanish Inquisition, shows that although some people try to control us and they think we're not free, we nevertheless feel that we are free. And that is the freedom that we're celebrating today. And when we come to our Seder, that is a freedom that we can have, is this mental freedom, is the freedom that we have a choice to do what we want, how we want to do it, to serve Hashem the way we want to, etc., without limitations of what other people might want to, how they might want to control us. We still are mentally, emotionally free. And that is the freedom that we can relate to today. And the third and final thing that I want to mention of our perspective on the Seder before we get into it is we know that the leaving of Egypt, the exodus of Egypt, is not just a story from once upon a time, but it's actually a story of today. It's a story that is relevant to us right now. What does that mean? Every single person has their Egypt. What do you mean we all have Egypt? We don't live in Egypt. Mitzrayim, the Hebrew word for Egypt, if we flip around the vowels, becomes Meitzarim. Meitzarim means limitations, constrictions. And every single one of us have that thing. There's not one person in this world that doesn't have its challenges. I'd want to keep Shabbos, but it's the one day a week that I go have a coffee with my wife. I can't. Or I would like to put on tefillin, but it's a little bit difficult for me. Or I'd like to do all sorts of things. Everyone has good things with good intentions that they want to do and they want to achieve. But unfortunately, the reality is that due to different circumstances, they limit themselves that they're not able to do it. And that is what we do Pesach. And that's why I ask every single one of you that is watching that before this Seder, sit around the table and ask everyone around your Seder table to give a moment, to pause, to think for a second, and think in your mind, what is something that you maybe would like to overcome? What is a challenge in your Yiddishkeit, in other areas that you might have, your own Egypt, your own limitations that you might have, that you would like to overcome at this Seder, at this time? And think about that and use the Seder as an experience. The Pesach Seder is not just a ceremony, it's a personal experience. Use this personal experience to think and to feel about how you are going to overcome your Egypt. And through this experience of the Seder and the different steps and the different stages, you are able to overcome and you are able to kind of break out and use that as a mental form of meditation even, to come out of your Egypt. So those are a number of ways that we can kind of relate to the idea of Pesach, of the Seder in our times, either mental freedom or freedom of coming out of our limitations. And these are things that I ask you guys to think about at your Seder to make it a little bit more meaningful. But now let's get into the Seder. Now, the Seder, so that is maybe a bit of a mindset, which is very important. The Seder, as we know, actually has many, many, many different customs. Every single thing has a different way to do it. I do it like this, you do it like that, he does it like that. Everyone has a different way to do things in the Seder. And therefore, when the topics that I'm going to touch upon, I'm going to try and bring a number of opinions, just so you see some of the different ideas that in the Seder. So the first thing is actually that it is customary when we celebrate Pesach and when we have the Seder that we're making it a very special occasion. As we said before, we have that mindset and we want it to be a special evening. And therefore, there are those people that actually set their table with silver ornaments, they bring out their finest dishes, etc., etc. And it's actually it's a custom, and it's actually Jewish law to set your table nicely, to really have that banquet feel. It is our Pesach Seder. It's very, very, very special. Now, some people actually wear a kittel, like you wear on Yom Kippur. I personally, it's not my custom to do so, but many people do have that custom as it is a special evening. So, first of all, the Haggadah. Haggadah is a central part in the Seder. Why is it called the Haggadah? Why is it called Haggadah? What does Haggadah mean? Just a bit of interesting facts. Haggadah, first, I'm going to share with you 3 different reasons. Reason number 1, Haggadah comes from the word V'higadata levincha. One of the fundamental mitzvahs, actually, if I would ask you, what are the most important mitzvahs in the Seder? Most people will tell you matzah, maror, 4 cups of wine, maybe leaning, the dipping, different other things. Telling the story of Pesach is actually a biblical commandment and is one of the most important mitzvahs of the night of the Seder. Contrary to what some may think, it is crucial, it is vital to the Seder, is telling the story. In a way, it is biblical. 4 cups of wine actually is rabbinical. So obviously, even though it's rabbinical, it's still something that we must do. But this telling the story of the Pesach Seder actually is crucial. So V'higadata levincha is the pasuk that says you should tell this story over to your son. You could take the word Haggadah from V'higadata, and that's why we have the Haggadah, because it's the telling over of the story to your son. That's one reason why it's called the Haggadah. The second reason why it's called the Haggadah is some people actually say Haggadah comes from the word thank you and praise. We're using the night of Pesach to thank and praise Hashem for the exodus of Egypt. And the third reason why it's called Haggadah actually comes from the word Agadah, which Agadah means homiletic. It means that people, it's like kind of like a story, a discussion, etc., etc., and that's where the word Haggadah comes from. Now, the first thing that we got to do when we get to the Seder is we prepare our Seder plate. When do we prepare our Seder plate? Again, as I said, different customs. Jews always have different customs. One opinion is actually that you set up your Seder plate and your entire table before you even go to shul. Another opinion is that once you get home, you set it up, and then you make Kiddush and you start the Seder. There's actually a third opinion that holds that you make Kiddush almost like Shabbos, and then you set up your Seder plate. Most people, including myself, follow the custom to actually set up the Seder plate after you've come home. The actual plate, obviously you should set your table before Yom Tov, it's part of the mitzvah, to set up the actual Seder plate after you've come home, but before you've actually started Kiddush and before you've actually started the Seder. Now, how does our Seder plate look? Again, there are many, many, many customs. First of all, we have 3 matzahs. Does anyone know the significance of 3 matzahs? What are the significances of 3 matzahs? The significance of 3 matzahs is there another, again, a number of reasons. Like Pesach, everything's about reasons. Everything's split up in many reasons. Number 1 is in the story of Abraham, when Abraham's wife Sarah, Abraham and his wife Sarah, they were at home. They did not have a child yet. And Avram had just given himself a bris, and he had no visitors. And 3 angels come out of the horizon, and the whole story that Hashem sent him angels, and Avram gave them food. And the pasuk says, Shlosh se'im kelach kemach solet. Avram gave them 3 sa'ah, a measurement of fine flour. That's what Avram gave them. Now, the commentaries explain that when was this story? It was on Pesach. So he made these breads out of 3 sa'ah, 3 measurements of flour. So that explanation says that why do we have 3 matzahs to kind of commemorate? Why 3 to commemorate at the Seder to commemorate the 3 measures of flour / matzah that Avram gave the angels in the desert? That's number one. Another reason says actually that it is corresponding to the 3 forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's why we have 3. Another one is it actually corresponds to, it's the idea of unity of all the Jews. It corresponds to all the Jews. Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael are the 3 categories of Jewish people. And in fact, if you take the letters Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael, and you take the first letter of each one, is Chaf Lamed Yud. If you read it backwards, Yud Lamed Chaf, it comes Yelech, which means to go, which is, again, connected to going out of Egypt, and also ties back into what I told you earlier, that Yelech of the matzah is that to remind us that the Seder is a personal journey, it's a personal experience. We are traveling in our Seder, going through our experience throughout the Seder. So that's the Yelech. Interestingly enough, if you look at the other way, Chaf Lamed Yud is Kli, which means vessel, something that is a receptacle. And therefore, for those who are using the round Shmur matzah, like myself, there is a custom to try find ones that have a little bit of a bend, to use for your Seder plate, which you can put kind of facing up like a Kli to commemorate the Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. Just another interesting custom. So we set up a Seder plate with 3 different matzahs. Now, comes the Seder plate. How are you meant to set up the Seder plate on the top? Many of you have seen different ways to set up the Seder plate. And again, there are a number of customs. One way, you often see sometimes people do it like in a round circle. There are actually some people that put the matzah on top of the Seder plate. There are people that put matzah on the side and the other signs on the other side. All sorts of ways. Everyone pretty much agrees on the 6 things that are meant to go on the Seder plate. But the Arizal was of the opinion that you do it kind of in, if you know the vowels segol, the Hebrew vowel segol, 2 segols, one on top of the other. So you do round, round underneath, round underneath. If any of you have seen kind of the Kabbalistic drawing of, Chachma, Bina, Dar, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, etc. So that kind of idea, that's how you set up the Seder plate with 6 of them. That is the Arizal's custom. It is the custom of Chabad. It's actually probably the most predominant custom within Jewry. So it's majority of world Jewry follows the opinion of the Arizal. However, that does not mean that there are many, many other people that do different ways. There are many other customs, all legitimate. Keep in mind that every custom has a different reason, has a different explanation, and there's a reason why it's done like that. It's not just for fun. So some people do it in a round way. Now, what do we put on our Seder plate? What's meant to go on the Seder plate, and why do we have these items on the Seder plate? The first thing that we have on the Seder plate is there's actually the Chazal, the rabbis initiated that we're meant to have 2 cooked foods on our Seder plate. So typically what we do is we have the Zroa. The Zroa is to commemorate the Pesach sacrifice. When the Jews were in Egypt, before they left, Moshe commanded the Jewish people that they should all gather a sheep and tie it to a corner of a bed, and they used that as a Pesach sacrifice. And after that, they went out of the desert. And every year, besides while the Jews were in the desert, only the first year in the desert, but ever since then, from when the Jews went into Israel, every single year they had the Pesach sacrifice. And in fact, that is what we commemorate, and they would eat it. This meat with matzah and maror. Just interestingly, if you think about it, the Hillel sandwich, which we have matzah maror, which is accustomed to have, was actually quite a tasty lafa. It was a steak lafa. It was a lamb lafa, in fact. You had your Pesach lamb with your nice, good piece of lettuce and a piece of matzah, which in those days, matzah was more of a fluffy, more like pizza lafa style bread. That's how they used to make matzah, obviously without the technology of today. So, but that's just interesting. It was quite an enjoyable meal, the Pesach meal. But in any event, so you have the Pesach sacrifice. So in order to remember that, we put a piece of meat on our Seder plate. What should it be? Some people say it is the leg or arm of an animal. Most people use a piece of a chicken, whether a chicken neck, which is my custom, a chicken wing, a chicken leg, different opinions. And that is to remember the Pesach sacrifice. Now, interestingly enough, there should be meat on it. However, the custom is, or many people have the custom, to remove a lot of the meat from the chicken so that you don't want to eat it, because we don't want to be eating what you don't want to be eating this meat at the actual Seder because you don't want it to be feeling like it is the Pesach sacrifice. So that's why we actually take it off. So we have this raw. On the top left, we have the Beitz of the egg, which is to commemorate another sacrifice the Jewish people used to have in Egypt. Not in Egypt, in Israel, when they had the temple. And that was called the Korban Chagiga, the Chagiga sacrifice. Why an egg? So some people say the reason why we have an egg is and for anyone who knows, at morning after a funeral, typically the custom is to have a meal with round foods like an egg or sometimes we'll have lentils, etc. The egg is a symbol of mourning because it's also a symbol of the circle of life or whatever other reasons that it is. But and therefore, because of that, there is a custom to have an egg, as we are always mourning the temple. The fact that we don't have the temple today, we mourn that fact, and that's why we have an egg at the Seder plate. So we have the egg, we have the marrow, which typically is a piece of lettuce. The best lettuce to actually use is cuss lettuce with some horseradish. We have the charoset. Now, why do we have charoset? So simply, charoset is actually to remember the cement that the Jews had in the desert. There was cement in the desert, and what foods do you do to make a charoset? Sometimes you see people make all sorts of charoset. They put mango, people put dates and pineapple and all sorts of interesting kind of foods in the charoset. Actually, the custom is to use foods that the Jewish people are compared to in the Torah. So apples, pears, some people use cinnamon, different nuts like almonds, other forms of foods that the Jewish people are compared to. I personally just do it a bit more simple. I just have apples, pears, and some nuts. But there are all sorts of customs. But again, we try to stick it to foods that the Jewish people are compared to, and you make it a bit like that cementy texture. And the custom is to put in red wine into your charoset in order to commemorate the blood that of the Jewish people. So in order to remember the blood, we have the red wine. So that is the charoset. Okay, karpas. What is karpas? Why is it called karpas? What's the idea of karpas? What are we commemorating? Why do we do it? So why do we do it? We can get to at a later stage when we go through that point of the Seder. The reason, actually, many reasons why we do many of the stuff is the children to ask. In fact, in general, in Judaism, what is the worst question in Judaism? So I am of the opinion, as I'm sure many others, rabbis will tell you, that the worst question in Judaism is the question that is not asked. That is the worst question in Judaism. Every question is important. Every question is vital. You must understand. The Pirkei Avos says, "Lo habayshin lomed." Someone who doesn't ask will never understand. It is important to ask. It is important to query. It is important to question. And that's what the Seder is all about. Often what we do is things that don't necessarily make sense, but we are doing it solely to get children to ask, to pique their interest, to get them to question. And that's one of the reasons why we have karpas, why we're dipping, is to get them to question. Why do we call it karpas? If you actually flip the words karpas, it's kaf resh pei samach. If you take the samach away and read that word karp backwards, it means perach, which is hard work. Samach is the numerical value of samach is 60, so it kind of stands for 600,000, which is the known number of the Jewish people, because that's how many Jewish men between 20 and 60 were when the Jewish people left Egypt. So yeah, the 600,000 Jews, meaning the Jewish people, parach, worked hard. That is where the word karpas comes from, to remember the hard work of the Jewish people. And as I said, why do we do it? We do it to and why do we do it for the children to ask? Now, what do you use for karpas? So technically, you can actually use any food that is the bracha ha'adama, though you want to eat less. You want to eat a small amount, because because in halacha, any food that we make a bracha beforehand. However, when it comes to making a bracha after you eat, you actually only do that when you're eating a certain measurement of food. So that being said, we don't want to eat too much of this karpas, because then you might be required to make an after bracha, which isn't part of the Seder, which is not what we want you necessarily to do, especially because the bracha on the karpas should be also carrying over and including the marrow, which you're going to eat later, because we don't make a bracha al-ha'adama on the marrow because we already made it on the karpas. But in order for it to extend, we can't do an after bracha. So therefore, you're meant to eat a small portion, enough that is less than the amount of an after bracha, which is what we call an olive size, which is, it depends on, olive size isn't actually literally that big. It all depends on the texture of the food item. If it's more fluffy and more airy, then obviously it's larger than an actual size of an actual olive. If you're really interested, you can message me and I'll give you the exact measurements for particular foods. But so that's the size of your karpas. It's meant to be less than the size of an olive. And what could you use? So as I said, my custom is to have either a potato or an onion. Some people use celery. Some people use radish. Some people use cabbage. Some people use parsley. The general custom is, but the halacha, the criteria is it to be anything which is ha'adama. Underneath the karpas, we have what we call chazeres, which is the maror that we're going to use for the sandwich. Now, 4 cups of wine. Before we get into actual Seder, 4 cups of wine. Interestingly, by the way, are women obligated in 4 cups of wine? We know in general, according to halacha, according to Jewish law, there are some mitzvahs that women are obligated to do. Other mitzvahs that women are not obligated. Typically, the general rule is any mitzvah that is time bound, any positive mitzvah that is time bound, women are not obligated to do. Actually, one of the exceptions is matzah and kiddush as well. Any mitzvah that is not a mitzvah, a prohibited mitzvah that is time bound, actually women are obligated. The reasons behind that we can discuss at a different time. If you want an answer, you can send me a message. But mitzvahs that so a woman is obligated to eat matzah. Is a woman obligated to have the 4 cups of wine, which is technically time bound? And the answer the Talmud tells us is yes. Why? Because the Talmud tells us, and this is important for every woman to know, the Talmud tells us, says, not only men were redeemed, but also the women were redeemed. What does that mean also? The commentaries explain, it doesn't mean also like the men and also the woman. It actually means to actually highlight the woman. As the Gemara in Saita, the Gemara in the Talmud says, that what is the merit that the Jewish people left Egypt? It is b'schus nashim tzidkanios, because of in the merit of the righteous women. That is why the Jews were redeemed from Egypt. And therefore, because it is the merit of the woman, similar to actually Hanukkah, and where we also say that women take a very central part in Hanukkah, because women had a big role in the miracle of Hanukkah. We have the story of Yehudis in Hanukkah. So the same thing over here in Pesach, that we actually say it because of the righteous women that the Jewish people were redeemed. That is actually the reason why women are obligated in the 4 cups of wine, because they play a very central role. So the women's role in Pesach is not only, the practical role that obviously they prepare the whole Pesach and they should be thanked very much for it, but the miracle, the reason why we're celebrating is actually in a large part, thank you, in the merit of the Jewish woman. So why do we have the 4 cups of wine? There are a number of reasons, many reasons brought down. I'm going to touch on a few of them today. First of all, there are 4 terms of redemption. When it comes to the Jewish people leaving Egypt, it says v'hotzeti, v'itzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. These are 4 terms that God uses in the Torah when it comes to the exodus of Egypt. I'm going to take you out of there. I will save you from there. I will redeem you from there, and I will I will take you out of Egypt. So these are the 4 things. Hotzeti is will take you out, and lakachti is I'll take you to me. Now, why are there these 4 terms? Interestingly enough, one of the explanations is because it corresponds to 4 decrees of Pharaoh on the Jewish people in Egypt. What are those decrees? If you want to know a little bit of the story, first of all, Pharaoh made big decrees and he overwhelmed the Jews with work, so much so that they end up having to sleep at work. Because and Pharaoh's idea of making the Jews sleep at work is that there should not be procreation. That's why he did it. What was his initial goal? He did not want there to be more and more Jews. He did not want the Jews to become so plenty that they will take over the land. So therefore, one of his plans were Jews will have to work so hard, they'll stay at work, they will not be able to procreate. What did the Jewish women do? They were quite righteous. They knew that they needed to keep they needed to keep the Jewish nation alive and keep the Jewish nation in survival mode. They made themselves look very nice. They went out to the fields that the Jewish people were working. With these mirrors actually that they beautified themselves. Those are the mirrors that they used for the kior that the Jewish women donated for the wash basin in the temple, and those which Hashem really loved, because again it was the Jewish women. This was their special mirrors that they used for a special purpose. They then went out and they enticed their husbands, and they did not stop procreation, and this is alluded to in the Torah in the pasuk. So That was the first decree. When Pharaoh saw that wasn't working, he called over Moshe's mother and sister, Yocheved and Miriam, otherwise known as Shifra and Pua, and told them they were the main Jewish midwives at the time, and he told them every single Jewish boy has to be thrown into the Nile, because obviously he also knew that through his astrologist, that the Jewish people would be saved with a leader that would be born. So therefore he wanted every single Jewish born boy thrown into the Nile. That was the second decree. They didn't listen. In fact, they helped the Jewish woman give birth. Pharaoh got annoyed and he made a new decree. Not to be thrown to the Nile. Pharaoh asked them for every Jewish boy to be killed, that they should kill the boys as they come out. They didn't listen. Came the third decree. Pharaoh said every single Jewish boy should be thrown into the Nile. He told that to his ministers. At a later stage, once Moshe came back to complain to Hashem, depart Pharaoh, let my people go. Pharaoh got so frustrated. They want to leave. I'm going to make life harder. He used to supply them with straw to create their own bricks and to create their own to be able to build. And he said, in fact, instead of me supplying you with the supplies, you have to go out to the fields and find it yourself. That was a new decree. So that was the fourth decree. So corresponding to all those four decrees, Hashem said 4 terms of redemption. And to correspond to those 4 terms of redemption, that is why we have 4 cups of wine. That is one reason. Another reason, actually, why we have 4 cups of wine is corresponding to the 4 exiles. The Jewish people were exiled for a time. We are currently in our last exile. And that's almost an idea of the 4th one is kind of a hope and prayer to Hashem that just as we were released from the other 3 exiles, we're going to be released from the 4 exile. Please God, may be very soon with the coming of Mashiach. And that is what the 4 cups of wines correspond to. By the way, one more point that I should mention on the point before, the terms of Gula, of redemption, is actually a 5th term that God says, Veheveti, I will bring you into the land of Israel. And that again, the commentaries explain, also refers to the coming of Mashiach, where Hashem will bring us into the land of Israel, bring us all back with the coming of Mashiach. Another reason why we have 4 cups of wine is actually in Pharaoh's dream. Pharaoh's dream, if we know the story, when Joseph was still in prison, and so they say that there was, so after that, there was the dream connected with Pharaoh with that we have the butler, and it says the word cup 4 times. And the Medrash explains that this actually refers to the Jewish redemption. So corresponding to that, we have 4 cups of wine. It's just another interesting explanation. Another one is that the commentaries tell us that there will be 4 cups of retribution when Mashiach comes, 4 cups of retribution that will be given to the nations of the world that persecuted us, and Hashem will give us 4 cups of comfort to the Jewish people. That's the 4 cups. Another explanation is the 4 cups correspond to the 4 letters of God's name. Why is that especially relevant to the Seder? Is because we know Hashem said, I did not redeem you through a messenger. I did not redeem you through a saraf, through an angel. I redeemed you with my own hands, with my own outstretched arm. God himself took us out of Egypt. And to commemorate that and to remember that, we have the 4 cups, which correspond to the 4 letters of Hashem's name. So we're showing that Hashem is the one that took us out of Egypt. And another couple of explanations is the 4 cups, according to one opinion, actually corresponds to the 4 mothers, the 4 matriarchs of the Jewish people. Another explanation is that the 4 cups correspond to the 3 fathers and King David. There's an explanation out there. And another explanation is that the 4 cups correspond to the 4 sons that we discussed in the Seder. And of course, the 4 sons is all about that mitzvah that I said before, that special biblical mitzvah of V'higadat levincha, telling it to your children. So that is this is kind of like an overview of all the different aspects before the actual Haggadah itself. Before going into Haggadah, we discussed why the Haggadah is called the Haggadah. We went through the Seder plate, the matzahs, and the 4 cups of wine, etc. And again, I just want to reiterate that that the mindset, that's kind of the most important thing, is the mindset that we must have at the Seder, again, is this mindset of we need to go through our personal freedom. Pesach Seder is a personal journey. What is that personal journey? That personal journey is expressed through the 15 steps of the Seder, which just due to, I guess, time, if we started getting into it, it would, which is, I guess, essentially what I wanted to get into today. But if we start getting into it, we will definitely not be able to finish. And therefore, I think we'll finish on this note. And next week, please God, we will have another shir that now that we have the background of all the different things and why we do them, and now we have the background of what our mindset's meant to be, we're going to go through the steps. I'll explain to you first on a practical level what you're meant to do, just so you know. I'll give some explanations and different customs of how to do it and why we do it. And I will try and relate that back to this idea of how this can relate to us on a very personal level, to making this a personal Seder. So with that, I wish you all a good night. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Mendy.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining, and hope you gained some insight. If you gained at least one insight, it was worth it. Hopefully you can bring some of these insights to your Seder. As I said again, we'll see you next week. And once again, if you need that Seder package with the basic Seder plate and the guide, etc., with some matzah, wine, etc., just to explain to you how to do a Seder, please reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to help you. So again, with that, I wish you a wonderful night. Thank you for joining. I hope to see you all next week, the same time, same places. However you logged in today, you can log in again. Well, please God, we won't have to, not everyone will have to be online. Some people can be in person. Please God, we pray and we hope that we'll be in a situation that we're not all going to be stuck at home. And lastly, if I can maybe say that I'd like to dedicate today's shiur that we just did to my grandmother, who unfortunately is unwell with this virus, and may she have a complete and speedy recovery and be in good health, in the memory of the Torah learning that we have, in honor, of the Torah learning that we have all been doing. And one final thing is, if you need a handmade shmura matzah, obviously we have handmade shmura matzah for sale, but if you want just a single matzah, if you're not getting lots of other shmura matzah and you just want a single matzah for your Seder, please reach out to me. I'm going to try and just get it out to as many people in the community as possible, but obviously with the restrictions it might be harder, so reach out to me so we can work out a way for you to get one of those matzahs. And with that, I wish you a wonderful night. Take care. All the best. Good to see you all, and we'll see you all again next week.
Good, Mendy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
L'chaim.
L'chaim v'livracha, as we say. And that concludes this again. I'd like to thank Rabbi Krebs for this great initiative. And we wish you all a wonderful night and hope that you'll join again next week, Wednesday night, 8 p.m., for the continuation of the shir as we delve into the actual Seder.